hello to all the students that are joining us at the moment, and to those of you that are going to check it out after we've done this session as well. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you guys and just ask you to kind of briefly introduce yourselves and kind of what you do and what Carrion is and what Nucleus is, if that's okay. So should we start with Ash?
Yeah, okay. Well, Carrion Film, which actually was a play on Carrion when I came up with the name, it was really, originally it was just me and Mick Grierson, who does all the soundtracks for the films. I had this idea when I moved to Devon to try and make films which were inspired by what I thought were the neglected aspects of British folklore and various sort of obscure legends. And just, even though I do freelance kind of animating anyway, I thought if I put everything that goes under the Carrion Film banner should have that kind of identity to it, that it's going to be something, it's going to be something animated, it's something big, it's going to have its roots in kind of British legend, really. So that was kind of that's the reason why it was created. But it really just became like an umbrella for people that I've worked with in the past, and working with people like Tom Atkinson, who then went on to produce Borley. It was just like an umbrella for that type of content. And so if I do an animated project that's like road safety or something, I always do it just under my own name. I never do it under the Carrion thing. So I keep that very much as a separate entity kind of thing.
And so that's what Borley was produced under.
Yes, yeah, very much so.
For those of the students that don't know about Borley Rectory, obviously you came in and did a talk a couple of years ago for some of our students as well. So do you want to just give like a brief overview of Borley Rectory as well?
A brief 50-year history. Well, it's I'll do a really short version. It was essentially a haunting that came to become very famous in the 1920s. It was a rectory that long had a history of hauntings, but it kind of came to fame when a famed ghost debunker called Harry Price went in to investigate it. And rather than go in and say this is all nonsense and this is this is not true, it's all being faked, he rather came out and said, he labelled it the most haunted house in England and wrote books about it. And it received nationwide press at the time. And it was a story that it was in all the books when I was a kid. All the ghost books, all the supernatural books always had at least 1 or 2 pages about Borley Rectory. And I was always amazed why nobody, at that time, and nobody had actually made a film about Borley Rectory. The second I announced I was going to do it, suddenly there were about 5 on the go. But that's what it is. It's essentially the film is an animated documentary about a true British haunting. So I think quite ambivalent as to whether it's up to your own mind whether you believe it's real or whether it's down to the imaginations and politics of the people that went in there.
So Jake and Mark, tell us a little bit about you guys and about Nucleus Films and how you came to kind of put out Borley Rectory with Ash.
I think it all started one year when Jake and I were in Cannes, sort of doing different things. And I said to him, have you ever been into the market area, which is where films are bought and sold? And he said, no. And we went in there and he said, I cannot believe this. He said, I think every filmmaker should be made to come here and see actually the business of selling films. And we'd done some work, I think, briefly on some extras for a company called Anchor Bay, and we had a bit of money in the account. So he licensed a couple of movies, and that's really where it started at that moment.
Yeah, so for me, I come from a filmmaking background. So, it was interesting to see how sales were done. And that's the first time I'd really seen that world. And I'd spoken to Mark because we're both big film fans. And I was always interested in, we love cult movies, and we thought that, it'd be nice to set up our own label and start releasing our own films as well. But really our core business is reissue titles, isn't it, Mark? Do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, basically stuff. Yeah, they're called back catalogue titles. It's not really new stuff. It's you could call them evergreen titles, really. It's the stuff that continue to sell because they've got an established fan base, and people will completely buy them over and over again in better versions. It's the same as an LP, and then a CD comes along, and an expanded CD. People want the latest version remastered with more extras, that sort of thing, really.
So on that, and on the kind of thinking about the going to Cannes, and also about Borley Rectory, what have been some of the key factors? I suppose more for Ash, but Jake and Mark, please join in on this. What are some of the key factors in getting Borley Rectory into festivals for you, Ash? How did you choose the festivals that you wanted it to go into? How did you kind of budget for that, and what were some of the other considerations?
Well, it being a crowdfunded, very much like a guerrilla type of operation, we didn't really have very much in the way of budget for festivals. I think we spent about a couple of £100 on it initially, and we were lucky in some respects because of the type of film it was, because it was kind of unashamedly aimed at people that loved Gothic horror. So the good thing about that is that it's very easy to target festivals, because you have a product that is of a particular genre, so you can easily target which ones are very open to horror films and that sort of thing. We had a little bit of crossover because it was a documentary, albeit a strange one, but I think it only played like in a couple of documentary festivals. By and large, they were all horror festivals. But strangely, because this is one of the few plus points about it taking so long to make, years. One of the few plus things about it is that among the genre circuit, it was very anticipated, which meant that some of the most significant festivals, or certainly significant for its exposure, had been waiting for it for a long time. So most of those festivals we didn't pay. They were so keen to have it part of their schedule that they said, we'll waive the fees, we just want to show it. And those were all the significant ones. Those were things like Grimfest up in Manchester, Celluloid Screams, the Derby Film Festival, things like Night Visions in Helsinki. The ones that really expanded on its exposure. We were invited to those, which I think's quite unusual. I don't know. I was amazed at the time, because those were the ones we were really keen on getting into, and those are the ones where they were saying, when it's done, or when it's in a shape that it's, you can see it, we want to see it. So it was accepted by Grimfest, where it had its festival premiere actually, without sound. I literally cut it together and I said, look, this is all I've got to show you. It's not going to be finished for another few months yet. And Simeon at Grimfest just said, we want it. Second it's finished, you get it up to us. And that was it. So it was extraordinary, really. I'm sure that's not the usual way it's done.
So there's a kind of luck and judgment there in building like the kind of the anticipation and the base for it before getting to kind of festival time anyway.
Yeah, there was. I mean, that's the thing. It took me a lot longer than it would take most people to make a film, I think. But one thing I was doing is that if I had a clip, or if I'd make an extended trailer that had some footage in it, and I would say, I haven't finished it yet, but are you willing to screen this? And they go, look, if it's the first time that anybody's seen anything to do with this film, we'll screen this exclusive trailer. So these little fragments of it started going out, especially to the British festivals, although I think there were a couple American horror festivals as well that got these little snippets, like at the Lovecraft Society over in where they're based now. But just little things like that. But again, like I said, it was easy in some respects because it was a genre piece, so that you could, and on Film Freeway, you can just target a particular fan base and then expose them to it.
So Jake and Mark, then Mark, we kind of briefly talked about this a little bit earlier, and Jake, you've just mentioned Cannes as well. What are some of the benefits and pitfalls in your experience of the festival circuit? Have you got any advice for our filmmakers that are kind of preparing to submit to them?
I think it's an interesting one. It really depends on, like Ash says, what genre film they've done. I mean, are your students likely to be having a finished feature film anytime soon, or are we talking about short films?
I think for the time being, we're most likely talking about short films. Some of them have kind of, in terms of submission, kind of working towards something that is a short film, but might have ambitions for something longer in the near future.
Yeah, I mean, a short film is a completely different sort of prospect to a feature film, because a short film inherently doesn't really have any commercial value apart from being a calling card for the person making it. So often it depends on the subject of the film. So if you have a short film which is maybe a genre piece, like Ash has said, there's a lot of festivals, horror, fantasy festivals, where you could put those kind of films into. If it's a documentary short film, there's documentary festivals. If it's like a more kind of issues-based social commentary type thing, then there's festivals which specialize in those. So I really think you need to research the festivals that you're interested in putting your film in. And even better, if it's UK festivals, go to them and see the kind of films that are in them. Like the Edinburgh Film Festival. If when all these festivals are opening up again, I would say have your students been to many film festivals and seen the kind of work that is in them, and then they'll have an idea of the quality and the standard that would be expected.
So, Mark, you mentioned earlier when we were having a brief chat about Cannes and about the way people are kind of engaging, and in your end of in the business end, differently now. Could you talk just a little bit about that?
Well, 10 years ago, the markets were, really solidly packed. But as each year has gone by, the attendance has dropped. Basically, because I guess the internet and people can get screening links online and engage with people via video conference calls like this. I don't know why it's happening, but the market is just changing. Obviously, of course, because physical media sales, they're dropping as well. And everything is more gearing up to online streaming and stuff like that. But we haven't been to a market like that in quite some time now, and it hasn't really affected us. We just contact people via email and carry on doing our business that way now. You don't need to spend thousands to go out in Cannes for 2 weeks anymore, basically. All that was fun when we did.
Yeah. But it's different if you're releasing a film, because I've always been in Cannes with two.
Yeah, if you're doing a new film, but if you're buying stuff like we are.
Yeah, exactly. If you're looking to buy rights to existing films, you don't really need to go. If you're a filmmaker premiering your film and you want to get attention of sales agents and people like that, then it's a different thing. But if you go to Cannes, that's very expensive. So you've got to have a film that you're confident that you could sell. Whereas if it's, but at Cannes, there's a thing called the Short Film Corner, which you can pay to enter and you can get your film in there. So that's a good way of getting your first kind of short film seen by people. I don't know what the distribution be like off the back of it, but it depends how good the film is, really, at the end of the day.
So that lets me segue kind of quite nicely into thinking about networks and networking, and you kind of talked about the two sides of it there, of being the filmmaker and having to be there and kind of pressing the flesh and showing your face and whatnot, as opposed to being able to email and video conference and work like that. How did you guys get together? How did the relationship come about between Borley and Nucleus?
Well, funnily enough, it's actually because of film festivals. But also, as Ash says, it's because it took Ash such a long time to get this film finished. I think I was aware of the film about 2 years before he had finished it, because actually you had contacted me on, I think it was Facebook, and just sent me some messages about it. And then you invited me to one of your first screenings, but I couldn't make it. So, but also because Ash, he's pretty plugged into the kind of genre circuit. Because you were writing for Fangoria magazine, I think, at the time as well. So Ashley knew a lot of the right people to really get his film noticed. And because he had Reece Shearsmith in it, the League of Gentlemen actor, once again, that lifted the profile. So pretty much we were aware of Borley Rectory for years before we got a chance to see it.
It had a lot of social media attention, didn't it?
Yeah. And then I finally got to see the film at the Derby Paris Cinema Festival, where we met Ashley for real, not virtually, but in the flesh for the first time. So that was great. And when we really got on and we loved the film, and we were talking to him about what his distribution ideas were for it. And at that point, you were in talks with, I think it was Film 4. So we were saying, look, if you can get a Film 4 deal, go with them, because they're much bigger than us. They could spend more money, etc. But I think you could carry on with that story if you want, Ash.
Yeah, for a while, It was in consideration at Film 4. It was something that Tom Atkinson, my producer, had sorted out. And actually, I think it was it Andy Stark? Andy Stark, Ben Wheatley's producer, had put it on a particular producer's desk at Film 4. And it all looks very promising and hopeful, but quite often with these things, you get like a change of board and somebody moves on, and your note sort of ends up just sat in an in tray, and that's the end of it. So we were kind of twiddling our thumbs thinking, this isn't going anywhere, is it? This is stupid. And I really trusted Mark and Jake when I met them, and knew their work because I bought a load of their releases previously. So I knew that it was going to be done well. And I just thought, look, instead of us just waiting around for something that might never come, let's just do this properly. So obviously, like you said, we'd met at the Derby Film Festival at Paris Cinema, and we said, right, let's do it. And ironically, because there had been that sort of wishy-washy waiting around at our end, we missed the initial release slot that we were thinking about, but that gave us a lot more time to work on a load of special features and featurettes, and led to all sorts of extraordinary things, like with the tie-in with the Usborne Book of Ghosts, and it became a wonderful kind of synchronicity. It's just what happens sometimes when you go with a gut feeling and just think, no, this is going to be great. Let's just do this. And we spent 7 months making it for it.
Yeah,
it's incredible. Yeah, but I think it's you have to kind of make a decision. I think when you've made something, there's never going to be that kind of, I'm going to buy a house with this, this is going to happen. That there has to be that element of, what do I really want the end product to be? Do I want it to be like the £4 DVD in Tesco's where you don't get anyone that Auntie Mabel can buy and goes, oh, I saw Ash's film in Sainsbury's. Do you want to go down that route, or do you? I think especially because of how long I'd spent on it, I thought, when this comes out, if it's going to be released as as physical media, I want it to be like a real kind of nice collector's edition. I want to feel really proud of it, and that was the great thing, because I knew that Nucleus has this background in what I would call kind of like connoisseur entertainment, that the release is made for like hardcore film fans that want all the info. They want all the lobby card art in the sleeves. They want all the extras, the trailers. They want all the goods. So I thought, well, it's going to get the best possible release that you can have.
So if I can just kind of very quickly run through a few of these. The Boarding Rectory on Nucleus Films website, and one of the highlight things is over 6 hours of extras.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've got a stereo and a 5.1 surround sound. There's subtitles. There's audio commentaries. There's 2 audio commentaries. There's a making of Boarding Rectory. There is a haunted generation. So the legacy of Usborne's World of the Unknown children's book series. There's the history of Boarding Rectory, anatomy of a scene, live Q&A. There's in conversation with film writer, horror writer and film writer Stephen Volk. And it just goes on and on and on. And
then there's the commentaries.
Yeah. Kind of gathering those together must have been an absolutely mammoth task.
Well, that's Chris. I mean, that's why it took us like nearly a year to get all of that stuff done. But the thing with Nucleus, because we're a connoisseur label, I mean, Mark comes from this background of always wanting to make sure that we have the absolute best version of a film and have trailers and content other films don't have, because, Mark is always looking for that in older titles where he can do a restoration of a film and put in scenes that have been lost or something like. So with Nucleus, our remit for us is always to try and do it better than what anyone else is doing. But we're a small boutique label, so we haven't got the money to spend, but we have got the time, I suppose. So we tend to put a lot more time into our releases, I think would be fair to say.
So how does that work in terms of being able to spend the time on it? How do you go about kind of gathering some of these kind of different things?
That's one for you, Mark, I think.
I don't know. I think as time went by, we just kept thinking of more things to put on it. I mean, Ashley had some stuff ready at the time anyway. He had a few bits of his own. But we just sit in the pub and talk about it over a few beers. And more extras will sort of come out of the ether, really. Oh, there's a few more we can do there. Oh, let's do that. Let's do that.
Well, the Usborne book one just came out of ether because Mark, you ended up
because they
couldn't find the person, could he? And you tracked them down.
Yeah, Ashley had been trying to find the person at Usborne who did this Usborne's World of the Unknown Book of Ghosts thing, and they tried to contact them there. But one evening, I just got lucky and got through to the right person, and she said, "I love that book. I'd love to reprint it." And I said, "Well, I'm sure if you did, Reissue would write an intro." And then she tweeted that, and he retweeted it, and then it just escalated, didn't it?
Yeah.
And then it all happened, and we filmed it all. It was great.
Yeah.
So then, do you manage the kind of the rights and the distribution around those kinds of things as well, or is it just kind of stay within the kind of Nucleus thing, or is that kind of then licensed to Usborne and so on?
Well, no, they republished the book themselves, and we were able to film a few bits with the original writer and stuff like that, and talk about how it all came about. So we incorporated that into it. So we then we promoted each other off of that as well. They promoted the Blu-ray and we promoted the book. So it was a double. It worked out really well. It was all over social media for some time, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But once again, that's because Borley Rectory sort of fascinates a generation of people. And that's what we found. It was a bit like going down a very deep rabbit hole when we started on it. And it's like Ash had been in this sort of vortex for, I don't know, like sort of 5 years by that point. So we just got sucked in.
So that's the kind of the boutique side of it and the collector side of it. But obviously, it's also on Amazon Prime, and is it on any other streaming services?
I think it's on Google. Is it Google Play?
I'm not sure. I mean, we've got a sales company, and they handle it, and they showed it at EFM, and there's a lot of really good publicity there and lots of interest. But of course, then this virus thing hit, and everything's just gone a bit quiet now.
Yeah, so we're hoping for some TV sales is what we're
we had some big companies interested, but until anything really kicks back after that, we don't know what's going to happen.
So can I ask you a little bit about the kind of the distribution of like trying to think about the factors in terms of distribution for video on demand? Obviously, it's kind of easier than ever to get your film onto something like Amazon Prime, but obviously there are caveats around that, and what are some of the factors in kind of getting your work seen, or just getting it up there, and kind of how does that process work?
Well, basically you have to go through what's called an aggregator if you're a company like us to get stuff on there, and you have to pay quite a lot of money to get it onto a lot of those streaming services, and there's so much product on there now, it's all lost basically. So I still think the best way to get your product out there is on physical media at this moment in time, because you really don't see much of a return from online streaming. You really don't, because there's so much product on there.
Yeah, and one of the reasons that we concentrate on physical media is because that's why we make all of the extras and all of that extra content. You don't get that online.
No.
Because you're not going to get 6 hours of stuff and audio commentaries and all the rest of it if you do that with Amazon Prime. So, we want to, and also the quality can be a bit variable when you're streaming. So even though like a lot of these streaming services are the future, it's very hard to monetize it for us and for the filmmakers, because you get very small returns. I think unless you're a bigger product where they're
unless you've got a mainstream Hollywood blockbuster or something, you've got no chance really of making any money on it.
Yeah, so it's very tough for the indie sector because with the sort of physical media being reduced in its hold on people, because everyone now streams stuff. It's a harder prospect to get your money back off your films. I wish I could be more optimistic on that.
No. It's interesting because it's. I think there's certainly in the southwest down here there are quite a few independent filmmakers who are kind of putting work out and getting different things made, and a lot of that seems to be that it goes straight onto Prime, something like that. And obviously the perception there is, wow, isn't that fantastic? Isn't that really successful? And of course it is. They've made something and it's brilliant and it's out there and people can go and watch it. But the reality is always kind of a little bit mired in the kind of grey areas around that, isn't it?
It looks good on paper, I think, and that's the thing about those types of releases. Yeah. I think it looks good because it is nice in a way, because then again it's back to the short film thing. It's another calling card, I guess, because at least you can say, I've made a film, it's here, you can watch it. But in terms of, like you say, in terms of revenue and things, I mean, you're not going to see anything back from it. It's exactly the same situation that's happened with a lot of musicians that are putting their stuff on like SoundCloud and Bandcamp. You know, they're making pence from their albums. I mean, it's just a completely changed marketplace. As much as it's exploded your possibilities of getting your work out there. Instead of you being like one person in a room of 50, you're now one person in a room of 1 million people, all doing exactly the same thing. So it's great because you have a platform, but the problem is it's a very, very crowded platform.
And so one of the ways that, just to come back to that, one of the ways that you guys have kind of found a voice throughout that is by making sure that your physical releases are of the absolute highest quality they can possibly be, sourcing the best material, making sure that all of the kind of supporting work, the kind of the artwork, etc., is of the best possible standard it can be.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, and obviously Ash, with his film, he had those incredibly high standards with his work anyway, because he'd spent years and years refining it and making sure it was beautiful, and all his artwork was stunning to start off with, because Ash he's an artist as well. So, you know, we loved working with Ash on that front. And, you know, to give you the positive side of it, for like in terms of Ashley, like Bordy Rectory, we've now had it, how long have we had it out for now? Is it coming?
October it came out, didn't it?
Yeah. So it's less than a year, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're looking that Ashley's going to start getting some royalties in the next quarter.
Yay.
So, yeah, he's actually going to start getting some money back. Now, to get your money back from a film within a year is well, it's not get your money back, but start getting some payments back, because obviously Ash has got to make his budget back. But we don't know how much it's going to make. But the thing is that it has sold, and there is a fan base for it, and there is an audience for it. But we've found that the sales have driven much more through the physical media than the prime side of things at the moment. If we could do a TV sale, that would be a much bigger lump sum. So from that point of view, though, you know, Ash will start getting regular royalty payments every quarter now. So, but it may not be, it's still not going to be a huge amount of money. That's the thing, but it's going to start being something back for him, which is brilliant. And that's what we want, because that means the film is successful if it's generating income for everyone.
That's right. Yeah. So, what, obviously we're in this kind of, I'm just going to call it a limbo at the moment. So you guys were talking about the European film market a moment ago in terms
EFM,
of
yes. Yeah. That's Berlin.
Thinking about moving forwards, you know, what's next for Nucleus, for Ash, and for what's the next project, I suppose, in Borley Rectory?
Shall I answer that first?
Yeah, I should kind of do that. And
you're going to hand the microphone in.
Sorry, yeah. Ash, yeah, let's go to you first. What's the next project? What are you working on?
Well, yeah, weirdly, when all the most of my animation work kind of disappeared overnight, obviously when this thing all kicked off. But strangely, bits and pieces have started to come back in again. I've got some feature film titles that have just come over, or about to come over, about a documentary about folk horror, so completely right up my street, which is nice. And it'd be good to flex the old spooky, folky muscles. But also, I suppose like a lot of people, I've been using the time to, I've been writing, so I've been expanding a short film I made called The Screaming Skull. I'm expanding that into a feature film and turning it into a very kind of dark, I guess you'd call it a Freudian gothic. Lots of people kind of trapped in their own heads type of stuff, and play on that myth of Screaming Skull hauntings. So yeah, I mean that's the main things I'm kind of working on at the moment. Still trying to keep that little bits of animation work coming in, whilst also kind of plotting, the next film. Really, it is a strange time to be kind of trying to do this sort of thing. And actually, saying that, I've had 2 other scripts over. There's 2 other filmmakers that want me to collaborate on something with them. Well, we've got a thing about the Highgate Vampire that somebody wants me to work on them with. And also a feature film about Amelia Earhart, which at first, when the writer was pitching it to me, he kept saying, I know it's not your sort of thing. I know it's not horror. And I said, look, actually, that really appeals. I'd love to be fascinated to try and do something about historic kind of aviation, but in a slightly kind of bally style, because I can really imagine it, especially when she's visiting exotic locations, and you could do it in that bally style where it's clear they're not actually really there, but you could really stylize it and really make it like kind of newspaper print or something. So yeah, I mean, these things are still coming in, and trying to keep the future bright and open at the moment, as everything seems so dark and closed.
And Jake and Mark, what about Nucleus? What are so this is, I'm going to slightly change the question here, because one of the questions that I got through from one of my students via email before this was how many of you, how many people work at Nucleus, and how, what do you all do?
We do a big quick head count then, Mark.
It's just Jake and I.
Yeah, that's it. We could get to 2.
And we both work from home, so we never see each other. Not anymore, anyway.
This is the most we've seen each other for ages.
Yeah. So basically, we have, I've got like 3 computers here. I've got a PC and 2 Macs, and I do all the encoding, authoring, menu designs and stuff, and editing and stuff. And Jake does featurettes and things like that. So we just combine everything, and we send things over to each other, and I combine everything here, and all the subtitles, everything, all self-taught basically. Just do everything myself now.
Yeah.
So just after Borley Rectory came out, we put out Ghost Story, a British film from the 70s, and currently working on Death Ship, another 80s horror film, set up all the Nazi ghost ship, and The Libertine working on now, and a European cult horror title. And another thing we did a while ago was the Video Nasties definitive guide, which I'm working on the Blu-ray release of that.
So what are some of the things that go into that? We were talking about it just before we kind of went live, but you were kind of mentioning about having to source some of that.
Yeah, sourcing HD materials for the Blu-ray, because obviously we shot a lot of the stuff back on the original DVD with standard definition. I've got to resource everything in high definition, and we did lots of interviews which were cut in standard def. I'm now having to repurpose everything in high def.
With Video Nasties, though, we shot in HD. So
we did, but all of the interview all the bits we put in standard
all
definition.
the film clips, yeah.
Yeah, but now I've got to upgrade all the video inserts to HD. Yeah, it's a lot of work.
So I've got another question that just around that then, which is, you said at the beginning you kind of work with all of these kind of films that are evergreen in a sense, but how do you find them, and how do you get the rights to them? What's the kind of process?
Basically, there's sales companies out there that some of them handle thousands of titles. You basically need to find out who represents. What's that noise? Hello?
You're all right. You've got like a day for nice thing.
I could hear loads of.
Yeah.
We've been. That's EVP. Yeah.
It's Borley Rectory, the curse, I tell you.
How do we stop that EVP?
Curse has gone electric.
What's going on there?
Bugger. Is it gone? No. Damn it. I have no idea what it is. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I think that's the way you just turn your mic off and on.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. Is it gone?
Oh, one of my students was saying that it might be your mic.
My mic.
Is it Ashley's? Yeah, I think.
Put your mic off and on.
It's off and on.
Yeah, it's gone. No, it's back. Gone. Back.
Yeah.
I think it may be an Ash. Is actually.
It's. I do think it's Ashley's. I think there's quite a bit of feedback coming through on Ashley's. Okay, so can I throw it out to our students and see if there are any questions that we've
sure, Mike Ash.
Ready on, I want to jump in on this. Whilst we're kind of waiting to hear if we've got anything from students. Ash, if I could just ask you to mute your mic for a moment, that would be great. So whilst we're okay, so we've got a question from Tom. Yeah. So we've got, what are the qualities of an evergreen film?
Well, probably the best example is something like The Evil Dead.
It's a film which is always going to have an audience that wants to see it again and again.
Yeah.
So, whenever it's released, there's certain films which just continuously get released and released. So they're released hundreds of times. So basically, a film which is evergreen is a film which you can just release again, in a better quality version with different extras, and people are going to buy it again. So, with The Evil Dead, like Mark says, I've got probably about 5 copies of it. I've got my original VHS copy still. But if you look at a film like, say, The Exorcist or any kind of classic cult horror film, Day of the Dead, Dawn of the Dead, all of these films have just been released endlessly, over the years.
It's like reprinting a good book.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are always going to want to read it.
So we're hoping that Borley Rectory will be an evergreen film.
I think he was asking me about how we track films down. A lot of the bigger, well-known sort of titles are with sales agents, but some of the stuff we've released doesn't have a sales agent at all. So you have to track down a producer or someone who has disappeared into oblivion and try and find out where they've kept the negatives and stuff like that. So it's not easy at all with some of these films. It really isn't.
And I see there's a question about trailers as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what makes a good trailer, and how do you decide what to put in them, and how do you kind of?
Well, that's a big question actually, because I actually cut trailers still for a living, and actually I'm a trailer maker. I work as a freelancer, editor, director as well. So with a trailer, it really depends on the use for the trailer. Now, there's different types of trailers which people may not be aware of. There's sales trailers which get used for sales companies. And in a sales trailer, you generally put in much more of the story and the plot than you would do in a theatrical trailer, which is trying to sell the idea. The old Hollywood adage is sell the sizzle, not the steak. So with a trailer for a feature film, it's always about capturing people's interest, making it look as interesting as possible, but not trying to give away all the key plot points. Although recently, I think some trailers tend to put far too much in them. Now it seems to be going the other way, and they're getting a bit long again. So really, trailer making is an art. If you look at different trailers, you can see, how far it's evolved. If you certainly go back in time and look at trailers which were made in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and then 90s to now, it's really an evolving medium there. So how you decide is really depending on the use for that trailer, and once again, what is the film about? What's the story that you're trying to tell? You've got to come up with a way of condensing that into something which is interesting in like 90 seconds, really.
So another question that kind of goes, but perhaps kind of quite nicely alongside that, are obviously, as a kind of small independent label, you're kind of amongst a whole range of other indie labels. But what do you think are some of the kind of the key skill sets that you need to have to be able to kind of work in indie kind of distribution and production like this?
You need to be able to put out the best quality product for the least amount of money, I would say.
But also you need to have an eye for something that's going to sell.
Yes, so, that's the main thing.
But see, with us, we release films that we like, hence what we call evergreen titles. We believe that people want to see the films that we like. So I think you have to trust in your own taste or your own judgment. So if you're somebody who's interested in a certain genre, then use that knowledge to inform what you think other people might like. So from a point of view of distribution, it's about being interested in your products, because if you don't like the films you're releasing, then you shouldn't really release them, because this is often the big with big major companies. They have sales departments, but the people don't believe in the films often, So that's why you end up with bad campaigns and bad releases sometimes.
I think one of the things that I'd add to that is quite clearly, Mark, you're an absolute demon of a researcher.
I am, yes. Ridiculous.
And so I'd kind of add to that tenacity.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah, Michael Mark, like the video detective. If like you want to find
the Sherlock Holmes of the indie film.
Yeah, exactly. If you need to find a producer that no one's heard of since 1972, Mark's the sort of Sherlock Holmes of that world.
Yeah. Well, when we used to do the extras, we used to film a lot of extras for Anchor Bay and other labels, and we'd always be trying to track people down. And do you remember one time I rang up someone who was just up the road, and it was like, we needed that guy who did Hellraiser 3 or something. Oh yeah, he's in the UK for this week only. You're very lucky. It's just weird things like that happening. Do you remember?
That was Anthony Hickox, wasn't it? His mum.
Yeah, Anthony Hickox. Yeah. Yeah, some people go up the road, or they're just here for that week, and it was just luck.
Yeah, but Anthony Hickox's mum was the famous editor, Anne B. Coates.
Yes, yeah,
So she worked with David Lean, and she's fascinating. Yeah. So I got to meet her as well, actually, because I've become friends with Anthony. I've seen him around on the festivals.
Yes.
He's a great guy, really great fun. So you never know what's going to happen in this business. It's fun. You should do it because you love it as well. That's the main thing. You should have a passion.
Well, if you're doing shorts, you could obviously make extras for people as well. For their, that's how we met basically. Just because I was doing stuff for Anchor Bay, and I was sitting in the office doing their website, and I heard, I overheard someone say, "We need some extras for Mark of the Devil," and I thought, Jake's got a camera. I know people, and that's how we sort of put it together. Oh, we can go out and film people, and that's how we got the money to license our earlier films, just by making extras for companies. So we still do a lot of stuff for Arrow and people. So it was a way of, earning money to license films before we'd actually earned any money from films.
I mean, Chris, with your students, do you think they're interested in working in distribution, or are they more interested in making films?
I mean, it runs the spectrum, really. I've had one particular student who did get in touch to kind of ask those questions about what are the skills that I should be kind of focusing on, because I am interested in working in distribution. But obviously a lot of the other students do want to go into production, or kind of directing or writing, or being cinematographer, soundies. So there's kind of quite a range of different stuff there. But that kind of brings me on quite nicely to my next question, which I really hope is going to work, because I need Ash to unlock the things.
The curse is back.
No, the curse is there.
Okay, all right, we give it a go. Ash, what would you tell yourself as a younger filmmaker? What how
Ash, you could try typing it out.
That's Ash's demon answering.
Yeah.
How would you make Forley Rectory knowing what you do, through that whole process? Would other things that you would change and improve upon?
I don't think I would make it in a different way. That's the funny thing, because everything that I make, I tend to make as a accumulation of everything I've learned up to that point. If I went back in time, I would probably say save up some money before you start making it, or maybe try and make it before your little girl's born, or just more practical things like that. I think in terms of the way that I make it, I think I made it at the right time in terms of the skill set that I'd built up to that point, because it was a weird mix of experimental animations and filmmaking styles, but also mixed with some of the things I learned doing commercial animations, even for such sort of some of the techniques I learned doing animations for rail safety companies, things like with the pop-up books. There were things I was experimenting for safety videos and things like that. But then I looked at that and thought I could turn that into a pop-up book using the same 3D processes. So I think it's like if I made Borley now, in some ways it might be a bit better. I might have changed certain things. I might have made it a bit longer, but then it would have taken longer. I don't know. I think that the films that you make are a little bit like, I tend to think of them as a bit like the sailors reach a port and have a tattoo at each port, and then you carry back out into the ocean again. And I tend to look at my films as being like little maps of where I've been and what I was excited about at the time. And it's quite interesting now to go back and revisit a short film I made back in 2008, And I've been finding books of notes that I made while I was making the Screaming Skull. And it's fascinating because I've looked at it and thought, I didn't put hardly any of this stuff in that short film because there wasn't time. It was 10 minutes. But that stuff's going to be amazing in a feature. All that depth, all that research that I did. You know, I looked into Celtic myths of the head cult and all this stuff. And none of that's in the short film. It's just bloke walks around a bit, gets a bit scared and dies. You know, it's just nothing really happens. But in this, I think I've done the research. So I think that they're just they're expressions of what you're excited about at a particular time. So I don't think I'd make Ball any different.
If I can put some words into your mouth instead of like Android beams or whatever going on there. You're talking a little bit about just making sure you're curious about everything that's around drawing in as many places as possible.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're very much about what you're excited about now. I don't like the idea of going back very much, which is why it's weird to be expanding a short film.
We've got any kind of final? We've got one last question, and then we'll just, finish it there. Have you got any advice for condensing 50 years of history to a film?
Who's that for?
I think that's probably for you, Al.
Yeah, what was the question again, sorry?
Do you have advice for condensing 50 years of history into your film?
15 years of history into 50. Ah.
So, taking, obviously, 40 years, it kind of has it as an expansive time frame, and you've kind of told us a small part of it, but it's a bigger story.
Yeah, I think you just have to go through and just find the most exciting bits. I think you also need to think about if your film has a theme, and look for the bits of history that seem to represent that theme. Because obviously there was a lot of stuff that I missed out from the Borley story. And people still tweet at me all the time going, why didn't you talk more about the church? And it's like, well, I didn't really get to that, So I think you just have to take the bits that are most exciting, that interest you the most, and that support the theme.
It's good editing, isn't it?
Yeah. Cut out the boring bits.
Mark's just run off. Jake, I know that you need to run off very shortly as well. And Ashley, I'd like to thank you and all three of you so much for your time this afternoon. It's been really fascinating, and I think we'll give you a virtual round of applause. Thank you very much.
One thing though, if you
if
the students, if they can decode what that demonic voice is saying, all the real answers are in there.
Yeah,
it's true.
Play it backwards at 33 RPM.
Cheers.